Hello and welcome to the Sallen Coefficient of Spirit Island. In this review series, I'm going to look at the depth of a game and how much time it takes to play it and whether or not you get enough decisions per minute to justify spending your time, money, and effort on that game. It's a painstaking review process, and I think it's unparalleled in the board gaming industry. I hope you enjoy it. It can get a little bit long, though. So I'm going to put timestamps into the actual description, and if you'd like to jump around and find things that are more relevant to you, take a look at all the different outline and the timestamps here. I'll get those in as soon as I can get done with the video. So anyway, my name is Joe Sallen. I'm the host of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, and one of the co-hosts of the Longview podcast, and I am really into taking in-depth looks at board games. I'm very passionate about it, and I hope that comes through in this review of Spirit Island, a cooperative game that is called the Settler Destruction Strategy game, designed by Eric Royce, and is published by Fabled, Nexus, and Greater Than Games. So anyway, in this game, you're going to be taking on the role of a spirit, trying to repel an invasion of kind of like a colonizing, maybe European power. So anyway, I'll be telling you first about my Sallen Coefficient for the game, which is a specific number that represents your decisions per minute, whether or not it's worth your time, if you're looking for decisions per minute in a game. I will then give you an overview of all the things that I find positive about the game and give you a brief overview of all the things I find negative, or maybe not so brief. Anyway, after that, I'm going to do what's called critical comparisons, in which I compare this game to other similar games to maybe help you make the decision of which one to get, or just so you can see your favorite game face off against Spirit Island, or maybe your least favorite game and see how that fares as well. So all those things to come on this description, on this video review and Sallen Coefficient of Spirit Island by me, Joe Sallen. I hope that you enjoy. So, first of all, I'm going to tell you about my Sallen Coefficient for the game. If you don't know how to play Spirit Island, I've made a video brief overview that I just posted, so go ahead and check that out first. I go over a brief overview of the rules. There are better walkthroughs out there, but it's at least something that I did to try to give you my perspective on how to play the game, and maybe a little bit even of my thoughts are just seeping into my brief overview. So check out that video. You're not going to find that in this specific video. What you will find here is in-depth analysis, and I'm going to be justifying my Sallen Coefficient for this game. The Sallen Coefficient is basically a decisions per minute. I'm one of those people who gets really bored at the table. I need a game to continually engage me. Otherwise, I disconnect, and I don't really care about what happens. I find that decisions are what keep me interested in the game. And so that's why I want to see lots of decisions. The higher the scale, the higher the number, going 0 through 10, the more decisions per minute. I've never given a 10 out to any game. That being said, the Sallen Coefficient for Spirit Island is a 9 out of 10, the second highest and the highest so far of any rating I've ever given. Spirit Island offers me constant decisions, simultaneous play with all other players, even though it's cooperative and what I'm doing does affect them. There's zero downtime. There's a few cooperative moments where what I'm doing on my own is very important to what is happening with other players, and I'm able to make decisions and help them to fill in the gaps that they can't help to protect the island against and help to create fear that's going to drive away these invaders. Decisions are very rarely automatic. They're almost always something that you need to consider several turns in advance. You're going to be faced with the consequences in the future. The need to balance the immediate relief from harm with the overarching goal of frightening the invaders creates an absolute tension. Can I afford to try to get more fear out of this, or should I just focus on containing the immediate threat? Every game system here is strong enough to stand on its own, yet it seamlessly integrates into an entire package, and that's why Spirit Island deserves a 9 out of 10. What are the pieces that make Spirit Island a 9 out of 10 on the Sallen Coefficient? Before I actually get there, let me tell you my own personal view of the game. My view of this game, Spirit Island, is a 10 out of 10. It's even higher. It's the highest rating I've ever given, and of course, I feel Spirit Island deserves this. Because not only is it so mechanically solid that it earns a 9 out of 10 on this metric that I've named after myself, it also is something that just gives me the feels. It's like I feel like I'm playing as the opposite of the conquistadors. I'm a Spanish teacher by trade, and I spent a lot of time reading the first-hand primary sources about the conquista, the conquistadores that took over the Aztecas and the Incas, Pizarro and Cortés, and these little figures make me think about that. They look like a cartoonish little conquistador, and I get to do historical justice. It gives me the feels, and I love it for that. And for me, it's a perfect 10 out of 10. But what are the pieces to this game that make it worth a 9 out of 10 on the Sallen Coefficient scale? First of all, in any cooperative game, you need something in the bad guy's behavior. And Spirit Island is very much a traditional bad stuff happens, you react. Bad stuff happens, players react. That sort of, like a pandemic style of a cooperative game. Here, the enemy behavior is programmed and it is known in advance. Kind of like in Pandemic, how you had the programmed behavior of that infection deck, how the cards would continually get shuffled together and put on top, and you knew what was coming, and it created this sort of tension. The enemy behavior here is even more programmed and even more foreseeable than that, because each time that the enemies come out and explore a territory, you know that in the next turn they're going to build on it, and the next turn after that they're going to ravage, and that ravage is what you really need to prepare for. You want to prepare so that you're able to do the most damage and create the most fear, but then also contain that threat that the invaders pose to the land and creating blight and destroying the native inhabitants, the Dahan. Or the Dahan. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. So the enemy behavior being programmed turns in advance. You've got a little bit that you don't know, but you're really able to make decisions because you can see what's going to happen. There's that little bit of certainty that allows you to be very much more than just tactical here in Spirit Island. Let's talk about the board that they're all set up on. This island is about the perfect size. It's bigger based on number of players. A single board is barely enough for when you look at that island, it just looks tiny. But when you've got multiple players in this bigger board that's just huge, you think, man, there's so many spots. But each player kind of has their own board. And in a sense, plays their own little game there on their board, but there is much more at work here in terms of cooperation. The size of the island, though, is just perfect because it seems small, but your presence is so confined, especially at the beginning of the game, that you're forced to make decisions about where you're going to focus your attention. And that's one thing I really like about the setup of the island. It also ensures by having ocean spaces that some areas are never going to be safe from an invader exploration. So it packs it with decisions about where you're going to try to prevent, hopefully, an exploration from happening, because you can do that. But also, it has a little bit of spaces that are always going to be hotbeds of invader activity. So I think that the board is just set up in a really ingenious way. I like the way that the setup of the game is static, but you're going to be immediately adding explorers based on a card drop before anything has actually happened in the game. So you are going to be having a little bit of an idea of what's possible that they can come out in, but once again, it's not necessarily known. So there's just enough so you can plan, but just enough uncertainty, just enough certainty that you can plan, just enough uncertainty so that you can always be caught blindsided, but not necessarily in a way that ever feels unfair. So the island is just the perfect size and a really great scene, a nice backdrop, and especially since there's like this thematic map on the back of the base game that I didn't even show in the walkthrough. Anyway, we're not going to go into that. We're going to stay focused here, and we're going to keep on going to talk about my main focus of the decisions the players are making in the game, and that is the actual spirits present in the game. It is called Spirit Island, for Christ's sake. So Spirit Island is about taking over a force of nature, a literal force of nature, such as the shadow flickers like flame, and just in general, these wonderful names and artwork and all stuff that I might talk about here at the end, but let's keep focused here. Let's talk about the shadow flickers like flame. First of all, you'll see that there's some flavor text. Yay, skip that. Let's talk about how it has a setup that's unique to this player. It tells you how much complexity there is here, and 5 different stats to help you get an idea of how this player is going to interact maybe with the other players there in the game. So you kind of want to be fairly well-rounded in these 5 different stats, but you'll know based on what the spirit shows you here on this side of the board. You flip it over, and you actually have So many different things that you can track. First of all, there's growth options. All your different growth options are going to be specific to your character, to your spirit. The 3 different growth options are specific to what you are, because some spirits have the ability to spread like fire. Other spirits have the limitation of spreading what feels like at a stone's space, at a mountain's space, mountain's pace. But you're going to have different choices, which every turn you're going to choose one growth based on what's up here at the top of your board. So specifically, this growth is going to be how you spread your presence out on the board, how you actually reclaim any played cards you've had, as well as gain a little bit of energy that can help in your economy and acquire new power cards. But nothing is ever all that simple. Even those decisions I've just talked about, reclaiming cards, you're doing that in lieu of spreading your presence, in lieu of acquiring a new power card or getting some extra much needed energy. So reclaiming cards, yeah, you've got a really powerful card. You want to play it every turn. But do you do that every turn? It's a decision you're going to have to make. This is packed with decisions. The other thing that you're going to have to decide about is once you do finally choose that you're going to add your presence to the board, are you going to remove it from the top row, which gives you more economy in terms of the money you have to spend, or the bottom row, which lets you play more cards and thus spend more economy? In the base, easy spirits to play with, the decision is much more simple. More complicated spirits, though, will start giving you symbols and giving you effects that are outside of what you would expect, like the ability to pick up a card every single turn, to the ability to reclaim a card every single turn. And this is even one of the more easy spirits, so they say. So you're going to have these effects that you unlock as you upgrade your presence and spread your presence out on the board. The board also is just full of decisions in terms of where to put your presence and where to try to be, and you get removed from it when they ravage. Great, cool stuff, like I said, on that board. So once you choose a growth, which could also involve your cards, are you going to choose a minor card, which lets you increase your hand size? You're going to choose a major card, which you're forced to discard and does not increase your hand size, and it costs more. But they're powerful effects, and they make that one card much more effective. Decisions all over the place. So what are you going to do here when you grow every turn? That's up to you. Then you're going to collect your stuff, and you're going to be playing cards. But you're going to be playing these cards not just managing your economy. You're also going to be trying to activate these innate abilities that require a certain amount of different elements that are present on every card. And you got a special rule that you're going to be needing to manage. You're going to be wanting to get the best of this special rule that's going to be giving you some sort of an advantage in the game. So that's something that is really, really cool about just these spirits. So many different aspects here. But just the growth itself, really, really strong on its own because of how just unique they get, how amazingly different they can get from one another. This one only lets you add where there's invaders or Dahan present, and it just makes it like this guy's bringing dreams and nightmares. The special rule for this guy is he can't even damage people. He can't damage the bad guys at all. He just creates fear and makes it more easy for players to manipulate the fear. That's the only thing he's able to do. This is one of the higher complexity ones, but it's just so interesting and different. And the main thing that I want to stress about these spirits is it might just seem like, oh, there's so many different ways to play the game, but the game is simple. No, the game is about the puzzle. The game is about the way that these different spirits that you are playing with interact with one another. And the way that you react to what the enemies are actually programmed in doing is very, very much a part of that puzzle as well. And that's why the solo game is so much more swingy. It can be really easy, it can be really, really hard because you don't have any ability to negotiate with other players and do the best for that specific board, that place. It's all dependent on what you've got. So it's definitely something to consider, that the part of the puzzle is just what are these spirits that are available in the game to all the players. So we've talked a little bit about the growth. Now let's talk about the power cards. The power cards in the game are going to, first of all, you're going to start with a set of 4 specific power cards that have your spirit's artwork on them because they are unique to your spirit. And they're going to really be how you play the game. Like if the spirits are like the meat of the game, well, or if the spirits are the main course, then these cards are the meat of the game. You're going to start with these cards. You're going to be playing a certain amount. Every card has a cost, a speed, a range, a certain amount of elements it gives you. All of these cards are packed with different bits of information. And you're going to try to balance out the amount of money that you're spending, the effects that you're getting, the timing that's going to happen so that you can do the most damage and be in the right spot to stop the invaders from their bad ravage or foreboding build or whatever it takes, or try to prevent them from even exploring. And you're going to be using these cards, which have vastly different abilities. And not only that, but you're also going to be gaining cards that are both minor powers and big old major power cards that force you to choose one of these cards you previously had, not necessarily your starting cards, but one of the cards you've previously gained, and choose to just get rid of it. So you're making all kinds of decisions with the power cards. The types of effects on them, though, range from anything from actually just doing damage to defending a spot and thus making it possible for the native inhabitants to survive and fight back. Or you could be pushing and gathering the native inhabitants or the invaders to try to suck them all up into one spot and bring a tsunami down on top of them. You're going to be doing all kinds of different effects that all feel very much integrated with the idea of the game, but so much a part of the mechanisms that you're trying to make these big actions happen, and they really, more than anything, can result on what other players are doing. So, but it's not just that. So the power cards have all kinds of cool effects. You're going to have to choose what to do. You're going to be trying to decide, which ones you want to go off fast, which are these red cards, and these blue cards up here. These are the slow ones, and they usually happen, they always happen after the enemy gets to act. And so you're going to have to kind of react to the enemy, and you're not going to be able to do so much before the enemy gets to act. So just really cool decisions that you get to make as a result of these power cards. But you might notice here on the side that every power card also has some elements. And those elements are going to get you closer to setting off your special ability. Maybe I should actually choose the power board for that spirit that I had, which is the Thunder Speaker, who really does a lot in manipulating the Dahan, the native people. I'm going to try to pronounce that Dahan word about 50 different times if that's possible. Anyway, you'll see that there's these different thresholds to meet, and you usually can get more powerful by meeting more of the thresholds and get to do more cool stuff. So you're going to be deciding, like, well, do I want to play that card or do I want to play this card? Not because of the effect it gives me, because this card's effect is better, but this card lets me get my innate power, and these innate powers are just huge. They're absolutely huge. As is your special rule. Your special rule for her, it lets her move around with the Dahan people, but then if Dahan die and she's next to him, she gets killed as well. Really sad, kind of. But anyway, it is just a great decision that you have to make, balancing your innate abilities together with the card play, and that's the theme of this game: decisions, decisions, decisions. Furthermore, let's keep on talking here, guys. The special rules, as I mentioned earlier, one of these guys cannot even do damage. Instead, he just deals with fear. And specifically, fear is what I'm going to talk about now. Hooray for a transition for once. So let's talk about fear. Fear and surprise and a ruthless efficiency and a very ham-fisted joke. I love that scene of nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Well, in this game, yes, you do expect the Spanish Inquisition. And you're a spirit, you're going to take that, not just Spanish Inquisition, but the Spanish Conquista, and you're going to take it and you're going to turn it around, and you're going to do it with fear. Fear is the main resource that you're going to be trying to build up. Fear is like a meter in the game. Every time you fill that meter, you get some sort of an effect, but you don't know what it's going to be. So there's quite a bit of drama every time that fear card gets revealed. It's really exciting, Sometimes they just whiff, and it's like, well, invaders don't build in cities this turn. That doesn't help us at all. Other times it can be so swingy that you're like, well, all this stuff that we programmed at the beginning of the round doesn't even matter because the fear card took care of all that bad stuff for us. But there is also the ability by, guess who, good old the guy who manipulates fear, who can actually flip these cards over and you can make more plans for them. So the thing about that is specifically that ability makes the game feel easier for everyone. But it doesn't just stop there. Every one of these spirits brings something to the table, some sort of ability, manipulating the positioning so that other players can come in with big fireballs, which those big fireballs are great to have, but if you don't have the ability to manipulate positioning, you're only ever going to be doing so much efficient damage. and you're never going to be totally efficient unless somebody can really collect all the bad stuff in one spot so you can really hit them hard. On top of that, you've got support cards that allow you to just give special effects to other players. Let them add cards to their hand. Let them gain energy. Let them make their slow abilities fast. Hint, it's a trap. If you play the Thunder, well, it's the Lightning Swift Strike. You play this guy, he can make the other player's cards fast. And I fell into this trap where I made their moves fast one round, and we got onto the rhythm where we needed the fast effects, and I just kept on reclaiming my cards and not getting any more powerful. And yes, don't fall into that trap. Don't do what I did. But anyway, these effects really do make you start to cooperate with other players. You're like, I can't do anything about this space. Oh, well, I can't do anything either. We're just going to have to kind of let it go. Is that going to be okay? Well, this is what I'm going to do in the next round to do something about it. Okay, what are you going to do? I'm going to be focusing over here, and I'm going to be trying to bring these things in, and I'm going to be doing 6 fear, so you're welcome. There's all kinds of interactions in this game that involve other players really benefiting from the ability to allow the player who's in the best position to take care of a specific goal that the team has. There's a lot of long-term goals, a lot of short-term goals, but all of that is really better with teamwork. Even a 4-player game, which can go on a little bit longer than the other games, involves so much teamwork, so much constant engagement that once you've planned out your entire turn, you've now got to figure out how to make that all work with what other players are doing, and frequently it's not going to, and you're going to go back and have to replay in your turn. But it's just something that happens, and it's not something that you can alpha game. There's too much going on that a player is managing. It is finally something that I've really been looking for, and that is cooperation without the loss of autonomy. You are able to manage your own growth, your own economy. You're able to take care of your own innate abilities, and you're not going to be dealing with somebody breathing down your throat. If you are dealing with somebody breathing down your throat, that's really sad. And that person probably knows the game like the back of their hand, and you know what? I don't know what to say. But I feel like it's just so much to manage on your own turn. As long as the other players aren't just taking an immense amount of time, you should be fine. So to me, I've never felt like I was alpha gaming or was alpha gamed by anybody else. Who knows? I could be the alpha gamer in my group, but I don't feel like I'm doing it, at least in Spirit Island. There's too many decisions, and we're all doing them simultaneously, and the cooperation comes after so many decisions have been made that players are not willing to walk back that round in most cases. So cooperation really takes the forefront here, and that is what is so amazing about Spirit Island. These are the main positives that I have to talk about in the game. The main negative I have is kind of also relating to the fear cards, the way that you can't really plan. There can be quite a few swings in the game. There can be cards that come out where you're like, well, there's a 1/4 chance that that was going to happen, and now we're just kind of screwed. There's nothing that we can do. And I feel like in a cooperative game, I'm very willing to accept this. In a competitive game, I'd be less willing to accept a imbalanced power card draw, because that's what you're doing. You're always taking, whenever you add a power card to your hand, you're always going to be taking a power card out of the best of 4. So you might get 4 that just don't work. I mean, honestly, they're very dependent on what you've been building and what your spirit does. So none of them are necessarily better or worse, but just some are more situational. They're all situational, and you might not get any that are good for your situation. That's my main criticism with the game. That's the only reason that could bring it from a 10 to a 9 for the Sallen Coefficient. There is probably ways that you could bring this to be a little bit more strategic, but it's definitely going to come at the cost of the time economy that the players are spending during the game, and I don't think that it's actually going to raise the Sallen Coefficient. I think that it is, I don't know if a 10 is even achievable with the Sallen Coefficient. But I hope that small negative gives you an idea of why it is a 9, and you now have an idea of what to look for when you go either choose to try to find or don't find and don't play Spirit Island. So anyway, that's just an idea of my thoughts with the game, and I hope that has been helpful. And now for critical comparisons. In critical comparisons, I'm going to talk about a game specifically, and I'm going to compare that to Spirit Island. The first one here is the toughest comparison I have to make because I feel it is a very sacred cow, and that is Mage Knight. I personally love Mage Knight. It is one of my favorite games. Honestly, Spirit Island is one of the few cooperative games that has made me feel the same as Mage Knight. Now, Mage Knight to me, though, when played cooperatively, isn't even really a cooperative game. Players are just simply avoiding each other in a way that helps the group get better as a whole, and not so much really working together. The only times that you work together are very, very unpredictable encounters, and all you can say is, I'm going to take this many enemies of this high a level, and you'll take this many enemies of this level and this level, and then we're both going to fight them, and we'll figure out our own separate puzzle. And hopefully we can both figure this out. And if we need to, we'll leave stuff and we'll try to fight this again next round. But it's really mainly about your own private puzzle that you're solving. And the game never does become much of a group puzzle. The group puzzle that's present on the board and trying to make the most efficient moves as a group is quite clear. And once you've decided what direction you're going, usually you just kind of stay and do things that are around there regardless of what you reveal, because the movement is so tough. So, as much as I love Mage Knight has a huge feeling of building up, and that is not present on the same scale as Spirit Island. As much as I love Mage Knight, Spirit Island is a much more cooperative game. I honestly don't even think it's fair to call Mage Knight a cooperative game. Spirit Island involves cooperation of about the highest level I've ever seen outside of one of my favorite cooperative games, Space Alert, which just doesn't quite breed a comparison to Spirit Island. It's just such a different game. But Mage Knight itself has the same sort of buildup of powers, comboing together of powers, and the same sort of crunchy decision that involves not only managing your economy, but also managing how many symbols you get and what innate powers you get to release and when they're going to go off. And it's so many decisions at once, and you do feel like you're able to build up to something amazing because you're not only acquiring cards, which is very much like Mage Knight, but you're also getting better at your economic things. But you're not getting so many new special abilities outside of the cards that you gain. It's more like you're keeping focused into destroying the enemies. And as such, I think that comparison hopefully gives you an idea. Spirit Island touches on what Mage Knight does, but it does a lot more cooperatively. So if you're looking for a more cooperative experience, more of a group experience, Spirit Island is hands down the one to go with. However, if you are more looking for a single solitaire puzzle for you to solve that goes from one puzzle to the next, and they're all sort of impacted by everything that you've done, and you never have to worry about any sort of group responsibility, which, by the way, everyone's responsibility is no one's responsibility, in case you didn't know, then I would go with Mage Knight. So if that's kind of your thoughts, that you'd rather not see group interaction and group cooperation, go with Mage Knight. It's going to be more of a puzzle that you specifically control. Still has the same sort of randomness of a tile flip, though, which is the same sort of thing that can happen in Spirit Island. So I'd say on the same level that way. Anyway, that is my comparison to Mage Knight. Now I'm going to talk about Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven is a new cooperative campaign-style game, and it breeds comparison to Spirit Island because in a lot of ways, the way that you are interacting with other players feels very much like you're playing cards for their effects, and you're manipulating what's going on the board just like in Spirit Island. I would say that Spirit Island even reaches this level of wanting to have a party comp, which is kind of an RPG term, but a party composition where you've got somebody who fulfills this role, this role, this role, like a damage dealer, a manipulator, somebody who increases increases people's health, like a healer. And so, I mean, you've got some roles that feel kind of similar to that in terms of what you have in these spirits in Spirit Island. And that's the same way in Gloomhaven. But here in Spirit Island, it's much more episodic, and you're much more in control of the scenario that you're specifically facing. And that can be what's kind of occasionally disappointing about Gloomhaven is it's like this scenario feels very similar to one we've already done, and we're really more together on the story that's folding out from game to game. So if you want an RPG campaign, there's no question Gloomhaven is for you. But Spirit Island feels much more like players are in control of what they're able to do in a specific game and able to change that from game to game. Obviously, just because it only has one scenario in its that even contains any sort of campaign play, but it really barely even has campaign play at that. But the comparison with Gloomhaven to me is more about that you've got these really cool spirits that are very different from one another that you just kind of have to play to really understand. And I think that Spirit Island is able to achieve a lot of what Gloomhaven does, but not quite on the same level as a party, just because it is so episodic. However, I would say that a specific experience in Spirit Island taken in a vacuum can be in many ways more enjoyable and more pleasing than a game of Gloomhaven, because you're able to customize so much of it. And that's not quite the case, because Gloomhaven is that campaign that you're following the story. Next up in my comparisons is one that I feel like is the most similar cooperative game to Spirit Island, and that is Freedom the Underground Railroad. It might seem like a kind of weird comparison, because Freedom the Underground Railroad is about transporting slaves to Canada to free them and also managing money. But in many ways, Spirit Island feels like you're kind of trying to manage these invaders in the same way that you're managing the slaves. Your goals are very different. You're trying to get rid of the invaders. You are trying to manage these native inhabitants, kind of similar to the slaves, where you're trying to keep them alive, but the native inhabitants do a lot more fighting for you. The thing about Freedom the Underground Railroad is it has two goals, same as kind of in Spirit Island. You're trying to remove their presence from the board, as well as increase their fear and make it easier for you to drive them away by removing their presence. They're a lot more interlocked in Spirit Island. Whereas in Freedom the Underground Railroad, when you collect all the slaves in one spot, you're going to be making a ton of money. But when you're playing with people who are fairly new to the game, you really just want to free the slaves. You really just want to get those slaves up to Canada, because it feels really good. It feels like I just freed a slave. I don't care what the game tells me I have to do to win. I just freed a slave, and that feels really good. When Spirit Island, I feel a lot more connected to the actual victory going on. In Freedom the Underground Railroad, you kind of have to sometimes decide, like, I'm going to literally collect all these slaves here, and I don't think that they're going to all get away, but I'm going to make a ton of money because I'm collecting them there, and then all these people are going to donate money to me because I'm going to show them all this good work that I'm doing, even though by holding this sort of, you know, like almost like a little press conference, obviously on the very much on the down low, that I'm going to make all these money from these donators. And in a lot of ways, it can feel very disconnected and feel almost like I'm being a bad person by winning this game. And I feel like that's cool and an interesting aspect in Freedom the Underground Railroad, because it tells the story of the difficult decision that abolitionists had to make. But in Spirit Island, generating fear is just good stuff all around. And that fear being like, you know, making it easier for you to win feels much more concerted. So if you're looking for a game that's more about dividing your focus and having to make that sort of a tough decision, Freedom the Underground Railroad is much more like that. But in Spirit Island, I feel like it's more part of this central goal and much easier to focus, though it doesn't quite take that decision path that could be present like it is in Freedom the Underground Railroad. So moving right along here, I'm going to talk about Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe is a cooperative game in which players are trying to survive after landing on an island. They're not definitely not trying to create a culture, though, well, in most scenarios. But Robinson Crusoe is a heavy cooperative game, much like Spirit Island, but the amount of differentiation between the different roles in the game are very key, but they're not nearly as rich as in Spirit Island. Also, Robinson Crusoe involves quite a bit of storytelling where the game is going to sort of swing you around a little bit. It does it still in a way that feels fair, but it's pushing it. Spirit Island very rarely ever feels like it's pushing it. It feels like everything that happens, you're very much in control of, and you very much orchestrated positive events and had an idea of what the negative events that were going to come would be. So I would say in Spirit Island, it's a much more concerted game, and it doesn't quite have as much of a story necessarily that gets told, but it feels like you're much more in control of these events, and the events feel extremely tied to the theme. Now let's talk about Pandemic. Pandemic is the cooperative game for many people. And my main gripe about Pandemic is that the difficulty of the game is very much about a specific card draw. If you just get dealt 5 of a kind in a color, the game has basically done all its work for you, and that can very frequently happen. However, if you end up with everybody being 4-suited, there's very little control that you have over how you get those cards. And it results in some of the most intricate, special situations that players must get together and plan. And by get together and plan, I mean really one player tells everybody else what to do. And here you've got diseases that you're trying to treat, which is kind of similar to the invaders that you're trying to remove. And then the outbreaks can feel very similar to the blight spreading. But here in Spirit Island, your roles are much better developed. The actions that you're taking are simultaneous, so it's never just one player's turn. But it does still have that cool programmed, like you know what actions are going to happen in the future. However, it doesn't have quite the same spikes in difficulty that you'll find from specifically pandemics, infection, the disease epidemic cards. And so that makes Spirit Island a little bit more consistent and a little bit easier to get more strategically involved in. And as far as the game length goes, Spirit Island can maybe go a little bit longer, but I've seen games of Pandemic where I feel like I didn't even make a single decision because I was told what to do. And yeah, the fact that Pandemic is such a random difficulty here, I mean, no, you're not curing diseases, but if you think about them as the conquistadors that did so many bad, horrible things, subjugated so many people, they're kind of like a disease. So that's my comparison to Pandemic. Now let's talk a little bit about Aeon's End. Aeon's End is a deck building game very similar to Dominion, except that you are cooperating to fight a bad guy. In Aeon's End, you actually do have a deck, so you're just kind of going through at a very fixed rate. Whereas in Spirit Island, it's more of a hand or a pool builder, where as you play cards, they go to your discard pile, and you have to choose when you're going to pick them back up. More control in Spirit Island. Aeon's End has more variety in terms of the way the tools that you're going to have at your disposal and your control over those tools. I think that something that Aeon's End does really well is nothing that happens in that game that is a player decision is really affected by randomness in the game. Everything is all out there at the beginning, kind of like in Dominion, and that's something I really like. And you never even shuffle your deck, so you're really in control of what you get and when. It's just that you're not really able to tech yourself that much or become more powerful aside from the cards that you add to your deck. Spirit Island adds more in terms of what you can do to add to your actual abilities outside of just what's in your deck and what's in the cards that you have. But the adversaries that you get in Aeon's End, the bad guys that you play against, do vastly different things and don't feel remotely the same. Whereas in Spirit Island, the game with adversaries does become much more intricate and much more interesting and difficult. And it does it in a very thematic way where there's like 7 levels of difficulty for all these adversaries and these scenarios that have all these different things. But in Spirit Island, you're still going to be playing the same core of the game. So if you want something that feels vastly different game to game, maybe try Aeon's End. But really, Spirit Island has the capability of feeling so vastly different just based on who you're playing as. It's just the enemies are going to behave very similarly. So that's my comparison to Aeon's End. Now let's talk about a couple competitive games. I know that it's not a competitive game, and thus it's not going to breed the same comparisons and not really going to attract the same crowd. But there's 2 competitive games to talk about here. And that's number 1 is Concordia. Concordia is one of the first games where I had a deck of cards that I never had to actually play. Like every turn I play 1 card out of my hand, you know, it's tough calling it a deck, but now I don't have access to that until I take a specific action that's tied to a card to get my cards back. And I feel like in a lot of ways, Spirit Island is very much a descendant of Concordia in that specific structure. However, the decisions that you make in terms of how you get your cards back and how you affect what's on the board in Concordia is very much tied to an extremely elegant to the point of almost feeling bare bones system of spreading yourself out on the board. The scoring is really cool in Concordia, and of course in Spirit Island, if you're scoring, you're doing it all together. It's not so much about what you do specifically alone, though maybe in future expansions we could see some sort of competitive play. However, in Concordia, I do feel like it's you have a lot more like this sort of interaction and interdependency with players, but you don't want to help each other. Here in Spirit Island, this same interaction and interdependency is there, but you want to help each other. And I feel like both of them benefit. Spirit Island actually has a theme, whereas Concordia really lacks that in that department, the way I see it. So anyway, that's my thoughts on Concordia. It's a really, really cool game, and it breeds that sort of like the difficult decisions, but there isn't any sort of, to me, I don't get any sort of thematic backdrop for it. And that can enhance a game. It never makes the game. But Spirit Island, I can have my cake, my theme, and I can eat it too. So, well, I guess I can have my cake, which is my mechanisms, and then I get to eat it too, which is maybe theme. I don't know. Anyway, that's my comparison to Concordia. And last and least, Catan. I'm going to compare this game to Catan because in many ways, it is the anti-Catan. Catan is a competitive game. Spirit Island is a cooperative game. Catan is about being the settlers and settling the island. Spirit Island is about getting those settlers off your island. Catan is largely about decisions that will depend on what the game has given you. In Spirit Island, it's more like you get to make decisions that affect your own self in the future, and you don't have to worry about the game getting in the middle of all that. You actually get to be responsible for your wins and responsible for your losses. In Catan, it's all filled with ripe with excuses of not getting the right dice rolls that you want. And for that, I just can't really go back to Catan very much. I have a very difficult time slowing myself down and going back to that feeling of being so limited by a game system, by the randomness in that system. And Spirit Island is unchained in that aspect. I feel like I'm able to just really be this amazing force of nature and spread out and destroy these invaders that want to blight and ravage my land and kill the native people that are a part of it. So Catan in many ways, almost because Spirit Island owes its existence in many ways to Catan, but it also shows how far we've come in the 22 years between Catan's release and Spirit Island's release. So those are my critical comparisons for the Sallen Coefficient of Spirit Island. I hope that you have enjoyed this video review, and I also hope that you will go and check out the sponsor of the Sallen Coefficient, the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, and the Long View podcast, GameSurplus.com. GameSurplus.com is an online game store with a guy in charge of it who knows games. He knows what gamers are looking for. He stocks the games that you can't find in a lot of other places, and he has a lower shipping threshold than even some of the big warehouse shippers out there. And he's doing it all with the best customer service in the industry. Check out Game Surplus. Carmen owns Game Surplus together with his wife, Elaine. You can send them an email, games@gamesurplus.com, and tell them what you are looking for in a game, and they will track it down for you. Carmen will do his best. Anyway, thank you very much for checking out Game Surplus, the sponsor of these videos. And I would like to ask you guys, I don't have any, I'm not going to be running any ads at any point. I mean, I'm not big enough for it at this point, but like, I'm not going to do any sort of Patreon campaigns, anything like that. I just love doing these videos. But what I would ask of you is if you have extra, please give to those that do not. And specifically, there are some places in the United States and recently in our Caribbean territory, Puerto Rico, as well as in Mexico, that have been recently affected by natural disasters, and there's a lot of people in need. So please consider, if you really like this video, giving to one of those causes. You'll find information on how to donate to the Red Cross in the description of this video. Thank you very much. This has been the Sallen Coefficient of Spirit Island. I am Joe Sallen. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you will comment below to tell me what you like about this video and maybe anything that you think could improve. Give me your thoughts on Spirit Island. How right did I get it? And anyway, I hope that you guys enjoy this great hobby, and I will catch you on the next Sallen Coefficient video review.